Right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our topic. It's navigating fund migrations, timing, trade-offs, and best practices. My name is Micah Sucherman. I'm head of investor relations here at AngelList. We have a pretty exciting conversation today. So at AngelList, we have spent years supporting venture firms with tech-enabled back office infrastructure, from fund formation and ongoing fund management all the way to distributions. And that's across $171 billion in assets and a network of more than 72,000 investors. So recently, we've expanded that support to help funds migrate onto the AngelList platform. And we've seen firsthand how big and how consequential that decision can be. So we wanted to host this conversation today because migrations, I think, are often framed as purely operational, when in reality, they are strategic, high stakes moments for GPs, CFOs, and operators. So our goal today is to demystify some of that process, help you understand when it makes sense to migrate, what trade-offs to consider, and how to do it well. And to unpack all of this, I am joined by Matt DiNardo, who is a fractional CFO, and Conor Queenan, who is Director of Fund Accounting at Belltower Fund Services, both of whom bring strategic and execution level perspectives on fund migrations. So as they join us, I want to cover two quick housekeeping items. First of all, our speakers have graciously agreed to participate in a Q&A toward the end of the conversation. So we encourage you to submit any questions that you have in the Q&A chat box below. You can do that at any time. And second, this conversation is being recorded, so we'll be sure to share it with all of you over email following the call. So thanks for joining us, Conor and Matt. I want to hand it over to both of you to introduce both of yourselves and your organizations. Matt, maybe we can start with you.
Hey, I'm Matt DiNardo. I am the founder and CFO consultant for Satori CFO Group. I do fractional CFO work. Anything from emerging managers to larger funds. I've handled quite a few migrations at my time on an onboarding team at a fund admin. And prior to that, I worked in private equity and I started my career in public accounting. So I've seen a little bit of everything, for better or worse.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And Conor, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks so much, Mark. My name is Conor Queenan. I'm the Director of Accounting at Belltower Fund Group. Belltower Fund Group is the native fund administrator for all the funds on the AngelList platform. We perform fund accounting, financial reporting, and tax services for over 20,000 funds that use AngelList. Before joining Belltower, I worked at a number of different fund investment advisors. And prior to that, similar to Matt, had a background in public accounting with PwC.
Great, thanks, Conor. And Matt, I'm hoping you can help us get started by setting the stage. Why do fund migrations happen in the first place? Why are they important? What role do they play in the ecosystem?
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons that people will migrate their funds between admin. The most basic being the fact that they've just outgrown their previous provider. The tech or the support is not what they need as they grow in complexity and size, and the workload grows. The other reasons can be some of the issues with the tech in general for the current existing funds, maybe some service issues if you're having repeated issues with your fund admin. Maybe the technology that you need now has outgrown what was there before. And just kind of going back to the first point, just kind of outgrowing the ability of your current provider to service everything that you need, whether it be the amount of work needing to be done, the size of the funds, or the complexity within those funds.
Right. And so, we know from our experience that it feels like a big deal and a big project. So explain to us why a GP deciding to migrate their fund, why does that feel like such a high stakes decision?
Yeah, there's both short-term and long-term implications when you're migrating. Short-term being kind of the confusion that can exist within the LP base. There can be a lot of time that's needed for it as well. I don't think that's one of the pieces that people don't always think about when they're migrating funds is how much of the GP or CFO or OCFO's time goes into properly collecting documents and organizing. There's usually help from the previous fund admin, but there's a lot of pieces that are missing and a lot of clarification that's needed. It takes a lot more time than people expect. In the short term, that can really choke up operations in terms of investing, in terms of getting reporting out, in terms of decision making, and just operating the fund on a daily basis. There's, overlapping expenses that can happen during this period as well in the short term. You might have to have both fund admin on for a while and have one of the fund admins shadowing the other. And then for the long term, there's implications on your books of switching between fund admin, given the different technologies that they use and the different software that they use. So one fund admin might use one software, then a new fund admin might use a different software, and that creates historical complexities. And if you're frequently transitioning fund admin, you'll start having pieces get lost in the history. So there's a lot of high stakes there. And then, especially when it comes to the LPs, you want to make sure that they're not confused or annoyed. You want to make sure that you're really outlining why you're switching. And you want to make sure that they're taken care of throughout the process.
Got it. And so it's difficult and complicated. We also know, I think you would agree that it seems to be more common than it used to be. So what, if anything, from your perspective has changed over the last few years that has made it more common?
I think there's two big components that have made it more common. One is there's more fund admin. There's more availability. The space is getting more competitive throughout the years. And the other piece is the technology has increased. This has both allowed more players, but it's also allowed switching to be more easy. It's not all manual. It's not keying in data from the last 10 years of your fund's information anymore. A lot of this can be absorbed. And with the increased tech and increased software, it's made the cost of transition time-wise go down. It's still high, but it's gone down. So that decision becomes easier with the increased technology to switch over.
Got it. That makes sense. So Conor, turning to you, hoping to get some insight from an operational perspective. What, in your experience, usually triggers that first initial conversation about migrating your fund?
Yeah, a good question, Micah. So that really varies from customer to customer or general partner to general partner. But in general, we see the triggers as being when a fund lead or a general partner isn't getting exactly what they need from their current administrator. It might be repeated errors or delays in getting data or financial reporting. It may be poor responsiveness or a change in the level of customer service that's being received. It could be that the fund lead has to do excessive manual work to get what they need for themselves or to get what their limited partners require or demand from them. So usually it's one of these things, or it could be a mixture of these things that leads to a breaking point and triggers the initial conversation. The other thing that we see from time to time is just a fund becomes increasingly complex, or the next fund that the fund lead wants to launch is going to be more complex than the previous one. So the the current administrator isn't the best fit to serve in those particular situations. And that triggers the initial thought or initial conversation about migration.
Got it. So it seems to me that any of those triggers that you mentioned could happen at any time. So sticking with brass tacks and pure operations, when is the worst possible time to migrate your fund and why?
Yeah, so again, it would vary from fund to fund or general partner to general partner, depending on their specific situation. But for us, a successful migration, typically requires extensive involvement from the fund lead or their staff to respond to questions from the new administrator or to provide support and get the new administrator what they need to perform the migration. So when a fund lead or their staff has low bandwidth, that's probably the worst time to migrate. And that could be when an audit is in place, is taking place, and they're busy with the auditors. It could be in the middle of fundraising. It could be in the middle of important, capital calls or distributions. So essentially, avoiding when internal team members of the general partner are heavily stretched. That would be the best time to perform a migration, or when they're busy is the worst time or the time to avoid.
Got it. So it sounds like the message is not the type of decision you can make with the drop of a hat, something you need to plan for. But I'm curious about the other side of that coin. So what is the cost of waiting too long to migrate your fund?
Yeah. So again, depends on specific circumstances or situation, but quite often, the longer you wait, the less desirable a situation gets. So the cost may be that, data issues that you're encountering with your current auditor, or customer service issues, they continue, they compound. It could be that your internal team gets burnt out because of this extra work that they're doing, because the administrator can't provide you exactly what you need. And then the last one, and maybe the most important, is if you have LPs that are dissatisfied with the reporting that they're receiving from an administrator, or the timing of that reporting, you're going to have ongoing dissatisfaction with the limited partners, which may cost you when it comes to raising your next fund, if they've had a poor experience because of the administrator.
Got it. So Matt, Connor gave us some insight into what triggers those initial conversations about migrating your fund. From your experience, all of the GPs that you've worked with, what do you see as the most common reasons that GPs decide to move their fund to a different administrator or platform?
Yeah, I'd say the most common is just outgrowing their team. It's starting to create some problems with service and the platform available. As your fund grows and as the firm grows, the changing needs really drive a lot of changing needs in service providers as well. Some of the kind of other reasons that I have seen are pressure from LPs. Some of the institutional LPs like to consolidate where they're getting their information from. They like to go to a single portal. Sometimes LPs have preference or teams that they like to work with. So they'll push that way, and I've even seen some LPs be on the board of certain fund admin, and that push GPs to switch to providing. I think it's really important in this decision making to balance, some of the political side of things with what's actually best for the fund and for the firm itself. I know that all the GPs out there are constantly towing that line and trying to strike that balance, but at the end of the day, the LPs do come around when you make this decision for the right reason, whether it be cost, whether it be getting away from issues that have previously existed, or just getting to a platform that better serves the GP to make decisions and gives them better information and more timely information.
Got it. So let's dig into that a little bit. I'd love to hear from both of you. So I'm a GP and I'm considering this. My LPs are putting pressure on me, or my team is frustrated. Help me understand the trade-offs, because for hearing from my LPs, it seems like the choice is obvious. But what trade-offs do you see GPs tend to underestimate when deciding whether to move their fund?
Yeah. So something that we see from time to time is, there is a bit of a lack of or an underestimation of the internal time commitment that's going to be needed by a GP or their staff to complete a migration, depending on the vintage and the complexity of the fund. The fund may have had hundreds of transactions that the new administrator may have questions about. So I think for me, the biggest one would be just the internal time commitment. Another one would be the knowledge transfer, the loss of knowledge from one administrator to another. Are you going to be able to, deal with that? Do you know enough about, the inner workings of your fund yourself, to ensure that there is a smooth transition to a new administrator? So they would be two that jump to mind for me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Also on the LP side, there's a learning curve. I think some of the LPs, when they push for fund admin change, don't realize that they're going to have their own learning curve on the platform and what information they have access to, especially if they're heavily involved in the platform and they're using it for more immediate data as opposed to waiting for quarterly reports. Getting familiar with the platform and having their team get familiar with the platform and the processes and the adaptation time. I think people don't always see that outcome. You're going to be getting your statements in different formats. You're going to have to click through different spots to find the information you're looking for. And I think some of the LPs don't always see that.
Yeah. So, Matt, I'm curious. Obviously, running a venture capital fund is hard. It's a lot of work. Uh, and not every pain point from your LPs or from your internal team are going to rise to the level of requiring a migration. So what situations are there where it just simply doesn't make sense? It's not a good idea.
Yeah, there's, as Connor mentioned before, there's a lot of times where it becomes pretty difficult to make that switch. If you're in the middle of something pretty pivotal for the firm, it doesn't really make sense to make that switch. You don't want to do it mid-audit or like right before the audit goes out. And as Connor said before, with the knowledge transfer loss, there's a lot of context that is needed. And then it takes, a couple months for the new team to get ramped up on that historical context and operations. So anytime where you need to move quickly, or, you're getting audit reporting out or doing a distribution, it's not great. One of the other reasons I see people switch, and I don't think it really makes sense, is they're looking for something that doesn't exist in terms of service or scope. They're looking for things beyond what fund admin actually do. And I think when you do your proper due diligence on what fund admin should and shouldn't be doing, that's helpful for this decision making. But sometimes, it's just better to reach out to your current fund admin and be like, hey, do you guys do this or not? I haven't seen this. And then it doesn't always make sense to switch, after you do all the research on the back end and realize it's, not something that your fund admin or maybe any fund admin provides.
Got it. That's a really terrific segue to something I think a lot of our audience will want to talk about, which is due diligence. So before GPs even start evaluating providers, before they start looking at the market and talking to their peers, there is going to be some important internal work on alignment. So Matt or Connor, I'm curious, what questions should GPs be asking themselves and their teams before they even start the process of looking for a different platform or administrator?
Yeah, I think that, when you're going into a transition or thinking about transitioning your fund admin, there's a lot of things you should really think about high level before you're doing that. A lot of people will have a bad interaction or two, or something will go wrong on the financial statements, and they'll kind of have this knee-jerk reaction to switch fund admin. As Connor talked about, timing, right? You need to make sure that's the right time for you. You have to really look at, why do you want to exist? Was it that single interaction, or are these continuing issues? And if they're continuing issues, what steps have I taken to mitigate them before switching? And then on the due diligence side, will switching fund admin actually fix this issue, or is this something that I need to go look to a different provider for, and have it as a standalone resource outside of the fund admin in general? With that, you have to look at what other firms are offering and make sure that it lines up with what you're trying to get out of the transition. And then, as Connor mentioned as well, like, what does our staffing look like? Is this a good time to switch in terms of support? Do we need maybe more people on the internal side if the fund admin doesn't seem like it's going to help with the switch, or it's something that's outside of scope for fund admin? And if we are going to make that switch and we're pretty set on it, do we have the proper team in place to help us with that switch? Because like we've talked about, it's more time consuming than people realize. Do we have people to gather documents, gather data, check that the new fund admin have reconciled everything to the previous fund admin, make sure that we're on the same timelines that we expected to be on, just be, that kind of go-between for the GP and the fund admin and possibly the previous fund admin as well. There's usually a conduit that's needed there.
Right. So let's say I'm a GP and I've aligned with my team. It's time to make the switch. My LPs are in support of it. The timing feels right. I've considered the trade-offs, and I start setting up meetings with providers. And we have a list of phone calls. What are the questions that I need to have in hand as I go out to these providers and start doing my diligence on them?
Yeah. So, specifically around the migration and their migration process, I would be asking the administrator, do they have experience migrating funds similar to mine, or working with general partners who are similar in terms of setup to me and the staffing that I have available? Asking them for referrals from clients of theirs that have migrated successfully, if they're willing to provide them, that's always useful. But I think planning is important, and from the get-go, asking them about a typical migration timeline, staffing on their side, so you can match that with staffing on your side. What's the process going to look like? Are there going to be is there going to be a dedicated team? Is it going to be the same team that I work with once the fund is fully migrated and live at the new administrator? These are all important questions to ask. I would also think about processes that the new provider or the new administrator has in place for liaising and working with auditors, tax service providers, or other third parties that I use, and just the overall post-migration service model as well. A big factor for anyone running a fund is going to be the cost. So upfront, finding out what the cost is going to be. Is there a specific migration charge or fee as well? I think is extremely important.
Got it. And so we're going forward as we're going through this process. We are also looking at our current landscape. So what questions should GPs be asking of their current or previous administrator about documentation, records, access, how I'm going to get all of that data from point A to point B?
Yeah, so the best practice when you've made the decision and pulled the trigger to actually move to a new administrator, the best practice is going to be to aim to leave the previous administrator with absolutely everything that you need in terms of records, data, support, so that they can be handed to the new administrator, and they can use that to start populating the books and records. That said, there are times when you leave a administrator and you need to access something later, or a question arises. So two important things to establish with your previous administrator that you're leaving is how long will you have system access to their portal? How long will you be able to pull reports or be able to go back and check things? When will that be removed? And then for how long will the staff at the previous administrator that you've worked with from the beginning of the life of the fund, how long will they be available to answer questions? What role would they play in the migration process? And what will they be able to do for you once the migration is actually complete?
Right. So, Conor, you have been on both sides of these, or all sides of these types of migrations. You've seen them go really well. You've seen them go poorly. What does a really well-run migration look like behind the scenes?
Yeah. So, the thing that I keep on going back to in these sort of situations, and the migrations that have worked well that I've been part of in the past, there's been extremely strong, planning and coordination from day one. So that involves setting up a clear project plan that all parties, agree upon or sign off on in advance, that outlines, specific milestones of what is going to be moved, and by when. Having regular status meetings, not sitting back and assuming that this is all happening, but having regular status meetings where the new administrator gives you updates on where they stand, the issues that they're encountering, what else they're going to need, is very, very important. So strong planning, coordination, and then management. The other thing which I would recommend, not everyone can do it, but I would recommend, if it's possible, to run your fund in parallel at the new administrator while still using the old one, even for a quarter, or a quarter or two before going live at the new administrator, and cutting all ties with the old administrator. That just makes it a little bit easier, and mitigates the risk of things going wrong.
So, Matt, I'm curious. We've talked about migrations as being a lot of work. It's a big project or a serious project, but they also happen quite a lot, and people pull them off. And we know what success looks like in those situations. It seems to me that having clear responsibilities and swim lanes is a critical piece of managing a project like this to make it seamless. So, what do you tell GPs about who should own the migration internally for their team? And also how involved the GP should be in managing all of this.
Yeah, that's a great question. This one is highly dependent on the firm structure. If you're a solo GP, you're probably used to doing everything yourself, and you're probably going to be in that situation again, where you're going to have to be leading both sides and being that conduit I was talking about previously. You're going to be heavily involved. It's going to take up more of your time than you'd like. If you do have a back office team or a CFO or an OCFO, they should be running lead on it. Really, what they should be involved in is making sure that the flow of data is happening at the right time frame to keep timelines going, being in communications with both sides of the previous and current fund admin, also keeping the GP aware of what's going on, and kind of giving them a summary of where things stand. I like to do the red light, green lights for these types of things, where you can see what's behind, what's on schedule, what might have roadblocks. But in terms of internal staffing, it's unfortunately be highly dependent. If you have a full built out back office team, the GP might not see almost any of it. They might just get an email once a week with status. If you're a solo GP, you might be unfortunately doing it and seeing everything that's going on and being a part of every conversation. This is one of those things you really want to plan around. And to some of the previous points that Conor and I have made, it's one of those things I think people often forget about, is that there's involvement from the firm themselves. It's not just fund admin to fund admin.
Got it. And a question for either of you. What suggestions do you have to help GPs minimize operational risk right up front?
Yeah, so I think, as we've mentioned earlier, trying to find good timing during the time to actually migrate to a new administrator is important. Don't overcomplicate things during that time. Limit other things that you have going on, whether that's other changes elsewhere in the business that you're planning to make, or other things that could just be distractions during the period of migration. As I mentioned, if possible, run the fund in parallel with the old administrator while onboarding to the new administrator. That also helps minimize operational risk. And then, the last thing is, once the new administrator says that they're ready, perform a detailed post-migration reconciliation of the closing balances from the previous administrator with the opening balances of the new administrator, to make sure that everything makes sense and everything has been migrated properly and successfully.
Yeah. And from the internal side, like having very clear guidelines and outlines of who's taking on what responsibility. Letting, if the OCFO or the CFO or the back office team is in charge of taking care of the full migration, so the GP can keep, a lot of the other operational side going. And then to Conor's point of the overlap, if there is overlap, letting which team know who's handling what. Like maybe the previous fund admin is handling Q1 reporting, and the new fund admin is taking over ongoing reporting, and they're also taking over ongoing capital calls. So just drawing really clear lines in the sand before the transition starts to which party's in charge of which tasks really helps.
Got it. That's all really helpful. It sounds like the takeaway message here is all of this is much simpler and easier to execute if you just walk into it with a plan and knowing what you're doing. So hopefully, this takes out some of the sting of having to go through a transition like this, makes it simpler for everyone. Matt, I want to switch gears a little bit and lean on you for a topic that's near and dear to me and my team, which is limited partners. How should GPs think about communicating migration to LPs?
Yeah, so I've seen both ends of the spectrum, where people either under communicate or over communicate. It's once again one of those things you kind of need to balance in. You want your LPs to be aware that you're making a fund admin change. You want them to be aware of the timing and what's going to change for them. Um, really outlining what is impacting them and how their day-to-day is going to change is very important. And then a lot of the decision-making process for you is helpful to give out. Like, hey, we were at this firm, we're transitioning to this firm. It's because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Providing them if you're saving money, giving them an outline of how much you're saving them and how fund expenses are going to go down. If there have been continuing issues, you're like, hey, this new firm is going to help mitigate those or eliminate them. Or just saying, hey, we had Sandbox Fund 1 and we did it somewhere that worked really well for us. But moving forward, we'd like to, really expand what we're doing complexity wise and just, being transparent with LPs and giving them the heads up before it happens. First of all, don't let them get an email from a random person because they're going to think it's phishing. And then outlining why you're going to make that decision usually, heads off most of the questions or most of the confusion.
Right. And so it seems to me that part of this is threading a needle between giving too much information, maybe enough that LPs won't care, except they might be worried if it sounds too technical or complicated. Or on the flip side, giving LPs not enough information. So what level of transparency do you think strikes the right balance between those two?
Yeah, there's too much communication. And too much transparency sometimes. Like you don't need to be like, hey, we didn't get along with so and so at our previous fund admin, or we really don't like how X, Y, and Z was done. I try not to like sit there and harp on or advise harping on, some of the, finer details or like the negotiations. You can kind of sit there and be like, hey, this issue existed. This is how we're mitigating it, moving it forward, or this is the previous cost and it was too high, and this is how we're moving forward, or hey, this supported what we did before, but it won't support us going forward. And this is how we're addressing that and how we're going to fix that problem. It's the same thing. You don't want to come to people with problems or, kind of be ragging or trashing anything. You just want to say, hey, this was the problem and here's our solution.
I and so when LPs are getting this messaging, what concerns do you typically see come in from LPs? What types of questions are they asking that demonstrate, hey, maybe I want to know a little bit more about this?
Yeah, some of the questions are around like, how's this going to change everything for me? Like, am I going to have to go? There's, some question on how much time it's going to take from them and how much it's going to change in their internal processes. Really addressing that to Conor's point in the due diligence and planning phase is really important. Just kind of having a set of of questions you expect to receive from LPs and then how you're going to address them ahead of time really heads off a lot of that. And looping back to the initial communication, kind of including some of that in there to head that off is really helpful.
All right. And then a last question on this, because I know a lot of GPs, this will be their main area of concern. How do GPs preserve the trust and credibility that they've built up with their limited partners throughout this process?
Yeah, I think really harping on the transparency part, like being open and honest with your LPs about the fact that you are transitioning and how it will affect them without getting too into the details on, any hyper specifics. I think it's helpful to set the stage. And then throughout the process, LPs really take the GP's lead on whether they should be upset or not. If the GP is, calm, cool, and collected and says, hey, like this isn't going to be a problem, or hey, do you guys have any questions up front? We'd like to address them, before we get into the process. Just kind of mitigating up front is really helpful with, being very clear, communicative, and just calm about the process. It really helps with that. And then, just reiterating that this change is going to benefit them, and listing out the reasons why, whether it's better tech, better service, better support. It might actually just make the LP's lives easier. And a lot of times when you make the right decision, it does. It really benefits the LPs. And just outlining those reasons really keeps, helps the trust and credibility stay there. And then obviously making sure that you follow through on those things.
Right. So I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the challenges of migration, how to prepare for it. I think all three of us, it's our jobs to worry about those details. But we also see this go incredibly well for GPs all the time. That a migration that goes well and is planned and prepared for tends to benefit everyone, the GP, the the venture firm staff, the LPs. Conor, I know you love a good postmortem. How should GPs evaluate how well a migration went, say 3, 6, 9 months after it's completed?
Yeah, so I think it's really a case of trying to think back to where you were 3 or 6 months previously at your previous administrator. What were the issues or the pain points that prompted you to make that decision to move to a new administrator? Have they been addressed? And hopefully you've made the right decision. Hopefully they have. So, it could be issues like the issues may have been things like that you and your LPs weren't getting accurate reporting, or it wasn't being received timely. It may be that the internal workload for your GPs for your accounting team, or for you as the GP, was too high, and has that now been reduced with the new administrator? So again, specific to each individual case or circumstance. But the question to ask is, are you in a better spot now with a new administrator than you were previously?
Yeah.
And so, oh, go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, piggybacking on Conor there, a lot of the times I'll notice that GPs are happier, things are successful when they don't bring things up, and all of a sudden they forget that it was ever taking up, mind share for them. The less brain power that they're using to think about fund admin in the back office, the more they're, investing in doing their operational needs. So usually the less I hear, the better, which is funny because I know that on the fund admin guy side, you guys will probably send out like, like, hey, it's been 3 to 6 months. How are you feeling? And on my side, when the GP hasn't said anything, that's usually great. They're like, oh, I forgot that I even used to care about that problem. Like I forgot that that was an issue. So that's usually the litmus test for me.
That's helpful. And I guess, Matt, from your perspective, I mean, the migration process also impacts you when you're acting as a fractional CFO. So what do you care most about when making the recommendation, when you're doing the postmortem? What are the things that matter to you most?
Yeah, I'm really looking for like good fit for what the client needs, right? Like I, if the client doesn't need to migrate, I'm not going to go out of my way to create more work for myself or for them or for anybody else to do a migration. But when they're needed, it's really looking about like, hey, what problems do you have? And is there another firm offering solutions to this? With how much firms are changing, and you guys know this well, the growth and increase in tech, um, especially that's available with you guys at this point, like people are looking for that, and getting them, an answer or a solution to the problems that they have is like really my main goal. Um, there's no reason to rock the boat if it's not necessary, but a lot of times these days, people are looking for more, and more is out there, and that's really where I try to, find the right fit for my clients.
Great. So we're sort of approaching the Q&A period here. Just to close us out on the discussion, I'd love a takeaway from each of you. And the question is this: what is one thing that you wish every GP understood before starting a migration?
So I think it's important for GPs to understand that migration is more than just transferring data, or more than just moving numbers from one general ledger to another. To be performed correctly, it may involve revisiting previously recorded transactions, or looking at items that happened in the past for your fund. But the payoff of doing it is that a successful migration can reap a whole lot of benefits for a general partner, and can ensure that issues that were previously encountered are no longer there with a new administrator.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think piggybacking on what Connor's saying, there's not like a one-click movement of numbers and then everything's fixed. It's a little bit of a slower process than that, but it is a long-term investment for your firm. It is, if you do the right migration and you find a team that you can stick with for decades, then your LPs have a really long-standing relationship with your fund admin. Everything is smooth. Your operations can be built around them, and it is an investment in a team and a technology, and really a home for your financials for a long time. So just keeping in mind that it isn't instantaneous, but it is well worth it to get to the right fund admin and to stick with them long term.
Well, thank you both for a great discussion. We're going to take the last few minutes to address some of the questions that came in through the Q&A. By the way, everyone, you can still submit additional questions if you have any. Before diving into the first one, we're going to have a poll pop up on everyone's screen where you can let us know if you're interested in learning more about AngelList offerings for funds. And that includes migrating existing funds to our platform. So if you're thinking about a migration, a big part of what matters is reducing the burden on your team and your limited partners. And at AngelList, what we're doing right now is using dedicated migration teams and technology to handle as much of the heavy lifting that Connor and Matt talked about as possible, while also making the transition easy for your limited partners, many of whom are already going to be on our platform. So with our new traditional plan, we're excited to offer established VCs a flexible tech-forward option for fund administration. So if you check yes on the poll, the survey, we'll be sure to have our team reach out to you directly. And we have a decent amount of time left for questions. So let me start with one for you, Connor. About how long does it take for a fund admin transition to happen from start to finish?
Yeah, so really depends. It depends on how many funds are moving, the complexity of the funds, the vintage of the funds, how many transactions they've had. So very, very hard to give an exact answer there. I would say that, from Belltower's perspective, we have seen and we have performed, transitions of single funds in and around a week. But it can take longer. Some of it depends on how organized the previous administrator was and what they're able to provide to us. So it could be as quick as a week, but it could be longer as well, just depending on the specific situation.
Got it. This is a question for either of you, really, but Connor, maybe I'll start with you. What advice would you give to a first-time fund manager looking at a migration? And then, Matt, I would love to hear from you on what advice you would give to a fund two, a fund three manager doing the same thing.
So, first-time fund manager considering a migration, I would advise them to, take a pen and paper and start writing down, all the things that are prompting you to consider a migration, getting them down in front of you. And then when you start talking to the various, providers or administrators that you're considering moving to, ask them specifically, are they going to have a solution for these issues? Are they going to serve you better? So I would be very, very direct like that with them from the get-go. But yeah, I always find getting something down on paper like that really, really helps. So that would be my opening piece of advice.
Yeah. And to build on what Connor's saying, because I think that that's the best first step, regardless of where you are in the fund life. I'd also look when you're, in your later funds, what support are you looking to add internally? How are you thinking about growing the firm and like what direction you're going in? As you get to fund two and three, things get more complicated. You have multiple, streams of cash moving in different directions. It's not just, a single loop of cash at that point. Processes take longer. You have a larger portfolio. Some of the portfolio is starting to mature at that point. You want to have information at your fingertips for the portfolio and have a portal able to support all that and a team able to support getting you information. I think those are some pretty big things you want to consider. How are your processes going to change? Are you budgeting now? Hopefully you are. As you get to fund three and you're looking at how the management fees are tapering down or picking up depending on fundraising and depending on funds ending, you really want to consider all that and how is your fund admin going to support that? And then one of the best ways to do that is to poke around, talk to a couple fund admin, get some demos, get some pricing, talk to people. I think that's part of your fiduciary duty to do that anyway, to go see what the landscape looks like. And then also talk to other GPs that are in your, in your friend group and like, who are they using and what do they like or not like about their admin? And then as always, if you know CFOs or OCFOs, feel free to ask because we see more than our fair share of the back end of everything and can answer questions. So just thinking through where you are in the life cycle and where you want to be, and then who's going to support that.
And just to build a little bit more on that, if you can, as well as thinking about the current pain points, try and think ahead of, where do you want to be? Where do you want your firm to be 3 to 5 years from now? How many more funds do you think you'll have raised by then, if everything goes to plan? And ask the administrator, where they think they'll be in 3 to 5 years. What plans have they got for people, technology, expansion? And then ask yourself the question, does that fit, or does that seem like a good fit for you and where you want to be?
That's a great segue to another question we got from the audience. And just a reminder, everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. So where is the fund administrator going to be? I think we know that there are fund administrators that rely more heavily on professional services, others that rely more heavily on technology. Seems like a balance between the two is going to be best. But Matt, in particular, based on your experience working with a lot of different fund administrators across all of these models, what do you think the right balance is between services and technology?
Yeah, I think it's rapidly changed over the last couple of years. It used to be, service could, muscle out tech, and I think that that's just not the case anymore. I think that you really have to have a good balance of tech and service. On the other side, I don't think that too much tech is good. I think you need to have a team in place. Nobody wants to put in a request for something and wait 6 days to hear something back from somebody. You want somebody who's, kind of lived through the life cycle of your fund or gotten familiar with your fund, can answer questions contextually from the service side. And then you also want tech that, it's going to be easy for you to make decisions based off of. It's going to be easy for your LPs to get information. It's really going to be a balance going forward. And I think that that's going to be kind of the expectation. And I think that there's going to be a lot of change over the next couple of years to try to move towards that balance.
And Conor, I hate to put you on the spot, but for my money, I don't think anybody balances those two things, tech and services, better than Belltower. And the extent to which your team leverages tech to make your work better is pretty impressive. So same question, what do you think is the right balance between tech and services?
Yeah. So as Matt said, I think tech is very, very important, but sometimes just having someone on the other side at your service provider that you can speak with, like a person, is very, very important too, especially for people who are maybe just have just launched their first fund, or are still getting their feet wet in this space. So for me, while tech, use of AI and automation of processes is extremely important and makes our lives easier and more efficient, there is certainly a role. And at Belltower, we are quite people focused, while also trying to improve our tech and the experience that our tech gives to our customers and GPs who use our platform. So it's a fine balance, but I think there's going to be an ongoing need for people.
Well, I think that actually takes us to the end today. So thank you both very much for the time and the insights. For the audience, if you'd like to connect with either Matt or Conor, you can find them on LinkedIn. And really a big thank you to everyone who was able to join today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to chat about this or to hear about it. Keep an eye on your inbox for a recording of this session. And if you need anything, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks very much. Have a good day, everyone.